to this day-long course on pioneering small-scale energy finance through innovative partnership models as a pre-event to the Microcredit Summit. And we are very grateful to our partners at the Microcredit Summit for allowing us to have this day to share our insights with you and the insights of some of the leaders in the microfinance sector and in the energy sector. So we have a really interesting set of panels coming up throughout the day. Each of you should have received a package when you signed in, and inside the package you'll see the agenda for the day as well as biographies of all of the speakers. So when we're up here on the panel, Sam and Saiful from the Art Finance team and I won't spend a lot of time introducing the panelists. We'll refer you to the bios that are in the folder, and you will be able to find all of the credentials of each of our speakers there. And the information is also available on the website of the summit, so you can also see it there. Throughout the day, you will find that people will probably add flyers to the table about their organizations, which we encourage you to look at. And we also have an evaluation form inside the folder where we would love for you to give us feedback on the session today and just leave it at the end so that we will be able to incorporate your comments and make any improvements in any events that we end up having in the future. One thing that I wanted to say about the way we hope that today goes is that what we're hoping to do is to begin a conversation in the morning. The only session which is going to have PowerPoint slides is this first session. And that's because what we want to do is we want to share a framework with you for the way in which we at ARC think about increasing access to finance for clean energy. And then what we're going to do is have a series of conversations with people who are leaders in the sector so that you can get their ideas and you can share ideas amongst yourselves about how to meet current challenges and how to look at the opportunities moving forward. We're hoping that there will be conversations between the panels also. So sometimes you'll hear something referenced in a panel early in the day that hopefully someone will pick up later in the day. And we encourage this conversation to continue throughout the day. We actually last night, a number of the panelists had supper with us, and the conversations were fascinating. And I said to all of the panelists, keep those ideas and let's make sure we share them tomorrow and expound on them tomorrow. I think Deepal Barua, who is going to be speaking later today, he was already changing the world last night. So we hope that that conversation continues today, and the ideas and enthusiasm of all of the speakers ends up being transferred to all of you here. So before we move forward, I'd just like to say a few small words about our co-sponsors. Beyond the Microcredit Summit, which all of you know about, you're here for that event, we have two other important sponsors of this workshop today, and also partners of ARC Finance. One of them is USAID, which has funded ARC under what we call the Renewable Energy Microfinance and Microenterprise Program. And that is enabling us to work with a number of the organizations here in order to help them either create or expand clean energy lending. And the other organization is Sustainable Energy for All, which is a new entity that has been initiated under the auspices of the UN to promote energy access. And I'm actually the co-chair of the Finance and Investment Working Group of the practitioner network of Sustainable Energy for All. So in that role, my job is to increase and to encourage knowledge about the financing of clean energy. So those are our two sponsors. I think there's material on both USAID and on Sustainable Energy for All in your package. And of course, I'd be very happy to answer any questions about either of those two organizations and about the programs that we're involved with both of them. So very briefly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Nicola Armacost. I'm the Managing Director of ARC Finance, and I'm responsible for today. We hope you have a fantastic day. If anything is a problem, it's entirely my fault, okay? So I apologize in advance and hope that it ends up being a fantastic day. And I'd like to introduce you to my amazing team, Sam Mendelson, who is our monitoring and evaluation specialist, and Saiful Islam, who is our microfinance specialist. Many of you know Saiful from many hats that he's worn at different points in the past. So welcome to all of you, and we've tried to set up today so that there are many opportunities for networking and conversation. So we encourage you really to engage in conversation and to move ideas forward. So very briefly, in this morning's session, we have a couple of goals, just a very quick explanation of ARC Finance and what it does, and then to spend a little bit of time talking about the rationale for energy lending, the global context, current trends, client demand, and the financing needs of end users. To many of you, these ideas won't be new ideas, but there may be some things that some people emphasize more than others, and so we just want to make sure that everyone is on the same playing field as the day moves forward. And then the third section of the presentation will really look at bridging that microfinance energy gap, looking at some of the products. We actually have two organizations that ARC has worked very closely with that are on the product side, represented here in the room. We have Greenlight Planet, who you'll hear from later, and we actually have D-Light. We're very delighted that a very recent appointment where we thought we were inviting SKS, but in fact we were actually inviting the new managing director of D-Light. So we're very thrilled to have you with us also. We'll also talk about value chain financing in the energy sector, some innovations and investment opportunities, and then some of the challenges and solutions and key success factors. And at that point, we really want to create a conversation with all of you. We have some ideas about some of those challenges and solutions, but we want to hear your ideas and your experience. So very quickly about ARC. Our mission is to promote and expand access to financing for energy, water, and other basic needs to build the income and assets of poor people around the world. We were launched in 2008. I actually founded ARC, really as an organization to bridge the knowledge gap in this energy microfinance sector. At that point, and I think it's happening less now, the microfinance sector and the energy sector were operating as very separate silos, as if they weren't connected to one another. And a lot of the microfinance attempts to engage in energy lending either had remained as pilots or were very small and not scalable, apart from maybe the exception of Grameen Shakti. I think was probably the only organization that had grown beyond that. And so the goal of ARC was really to encourage conversation and to encourage scale in this sector. We consider ourselves to be a neutral platform for knowledge, brokering transactions, bringing partners together, spurring investment, and incubating new business ideas. We're product neutral. How can I put it? We love everyone in different ways. We're not specifically devoted to one company or another company. We really want to promote a range of different solutions to this very serious problem that faces poor people around the world. We operate globally in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and at the moment, our biggest funding source and the source of funding that is sponsoring this event is USAID under the Renewable Energy Microfinance and Microenterprise Program that I mentioned earlier, and we call that REM. So just to start out, these statistics are not unfamiliar to most of you, and they're statistics that matter to all of us who are in the microfinance sector and also in the energy sector. And one of the words or kind of phrases that I ended up hearing relatively early on as I started ARC was a discussion of the energy poor. It turns out that the energy poor are more or less exactly the same customers as the microfinance sector. These are the same people. They're people who are living on less than $10 a day, many of them living on less than $2 a day. And the kinds of issues that you see up on this slide are the kinds of issues that those people are facing. So we all know the statistics relating to microfinance and the fact that even though we've come a long way in that sector, there are still many millions of people who don't have access to finance. And a very much smaller proportion of those people have access to clean energy. One interesting statistic that Sam found is that each year poor people spend $37 billion on poor quality energy solutions to meet their energy needs. That really is a crying shame, in our opinion. And the statistics related to the problems that poor people face as a result of lack of access to clean energy are familiar to all of you. 1.7 billion people don't have access to electricity. 2.4 billion people are cooking on traditional biomass. 1.3 million people die of indoor air pollution each year. These are actually solvable problems in our opinion. And so hopefully what's going to happen in the course of today, we're going to end up discussing some of the ways that all of us together can actually shift this situation. The other thing we want to talk about is what we think is actually very important for all of you as leading microfinance organizations that care about your bottom line. There is actually a huge business opportunity here. It's estimated that the untapped market for clean energy is about $195 billion, which is a very, very large sum of money. And you can see the Asian statistics, it's about 174 billion. So a large portion of that figure is actually is potential that's resident in Asia. What you're going to find today, and I think it's a tribute to everyone who's here in the room, is that there have been a number of shifts in demand and supply and awareness over the last few years. Clients are actually demanding access to clean energy products. One of my favorite stories is a story from Ethiopia, where we have a solar partner that became involved in clean energy financing there because the people in the village that this organization was working in actually asked for it. What had happened was that a number of donors had come to that village and they offered to buy the villages. It was a very remote part of Ethiopia. They offered to buy them diesel generators. And the villagers smiled at these were very important, rich people from America or from Europe. And the villagers sat them down and offered them tea and asked them about their husbands and asked them about their wives and asked them about their children. And after enough chit-chatting had happened, they said to them, you're very kind to offer us diesel generators, but diesel generators are going to actually cause a problem for us because diesel generators need diesel fuel to run them. Diesel fuel is very expensive, the prices are fluctuating, we're going to be tied to diesel fuel forever into the future. And if you really want to help us, you should give us solar panels, because the one thing we have in this part of Ethiopia is the sun. That's the one thing we have. And I thought that was a fantastic story to show that the initiative was actually coming from poor people. They really they understood the value of having renewable energy sources as a source of fuel for them. So clients are beginning to demand these products. It's surprising how often when we do market research with our partner organizations and we ask whether they know what solar energy is or what some of the other clean energy solutions are, it's surprising how many poor people actually know about it and would prefer to use it than some of the traditional sources. So don't underestimate their knowledge base. There are a number of MFIs, and a number of you are present in the room today, who are beginning to experiment with a broader set of product offerings. Some of the MFIs are piggybacking these products on other loan products that they're offering. Some of them are doing top-up loans. Some of them are tying it into education loans. We know of one MFI where they had an education loan where the students were given a lantern so that they could walk to school in the morning, because they were walking to school very early in the morning when it was dark. And this was considered a kind of an incentive to encourage the education loans, which we thought was very creative. Some are tied to housing improvement loans. Some are related to agricultural or rural finance, for example, solar irrigation pumps, or those kinds of. I think actually here in basics there's a real demand for that among some of your client base. And also tied to telecommunications, a lot of people are looking for something that will charge their cell phones, particularly if you're in a country which has a very low electrification rate. We have partners in Haiti, which has a 12% electrification rate, and partners in Afghanistan, which has a 6% electrification rate, where even though the electrification rate is very, very low, the cell phone penetration is very high. So in Haiti, you have a 12% electrification rate and a 70% cell phone penetration. In Afghanistan, a 6% electrification rate and a 56, I think it is, percent cell phone penetration. So there's obviously a mismatch there. All those people with cell phones need a place to charge them. And so finding devices that have the ability to charge cell phones is actually very valuable to people. Energy companies, and we have two examples in the room today, are also really seeing the bottom of the pyramid marketplace as an interesting potential marketplace. They're developing products that work for poorer people, ranging from smaller lanterns to lanterns that charge cell phones to solar home systems that are actually changing the way that poor people are able to access electricity. At ARC, we talk about this as the energy spectrum. So you start out from something very small. If you think about a solar light, that's sort of like a bicycle. And then a solar light that charges a cell phone is like a motorbike. And a small solar home system is like a small car, like a mini miner. And then a device which powers everything in your kitchen, that's like the Rolls Royce. So, people they don't necessarily want to buy the Rolls Royce the first time, but they aspire to that. They would like to be in a situation. They've seen Bollywood movies where people can do all sorts of, you can turn the light on and the stove works, etc., and they know that that's an aspirational product for them. But often they want to start with something that's small, and I think Aravind will talk to us later about some of the products that Green Light Planet offers, which is at that kind of bicycle, motorbike level in terms of the energy spectrum. And then later on, we'll hear from Willem and we'll hear from Deepal about products that are much further along the energy spectrum, where people have more fully integrated systems. And all of those, in our view at ARC, all of those different kinds of products have a role to play. As many of you know, donors and investors are interested in this space. We have Elmar, who is with us from the Asian Development Bank, that has put a lot of support into clean energy and around Asia. The Inter-American Development Bank is very supportive. USAID, as you can see from the support that we've received, is very supportive. And there are a number of investors, and we're going to hear from a few of those later. MILAP, we have Mayank here from MILAP, which is a very innovative kind of investor. He will tell you more about the way in which they source funding to put into MFIs. We'll also hear from Kiva, but there are a range of other investors as well who are becoming very interested in this sector. And we have just the general population. I have two children, a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, and my 13-year-old is constantly checking whether what we're doing in our house is good for the environment and good for climate change. And he scolds my husband and I if we have the light on for too long or if the water tap is dripping. So I think that there's been a change. The younger generation understand that the world, actually in other parts of the world too, a lot of children are realizing, and people in the general population are realizing that this is important for all of us. So just a quick set of slides on some of the kinds of products that are out there and the benefits. We hear a lot about electricity and lighting, ranging from the smaller products to the bigger products, to biomass power. Mechanical power is obviously very important for people. Water pumps, as we discussed earlier, in irrigation in rural areas. And also heat for cooking. Cooking is also quite important, and a few of our partners have experience in the cook stove sector. The benefits, I think many of you are aware of the benefits, ranging from some of the benefits which we think are very important and which Sam from our team has spent a lot of time working on, relating to income generation benefits. So increased income opportunities, so if the light is on later in the day, people can sew or do other kinds of income generating activities later into the night, as well as actual savings for customers. We met one of Neelap's partners in northern India. I was visiting, and we were asking what some of the benefits were. And one lady said a very interesting thing, which I didn't expect, which was, she said, you know, now I don't have to buy kerosene anymore, which I expected her to say that. And she said, and what I do though is I still buy kerosene and I sell it. So this is not necessarily the outcome that we want, because she's still getting that kerosene. But it was very interesting to see how people are creating entrepreneurial opportunities around clean energy. In Haiti, we were visiting some of our partners there, and they had bought solar lights, but fairly small. These were actually D-light lights, small lights that charge cell phones. And my driver had been listening to us as we were driving around talking about this, and he said, Miss Licky, I like your project very much. I want to buy some lights, and I'm going to take them into the rural area. I'm going to give it to my family, and I'm going to get them to charge all their neighbors to charge the cell phones, which was also very interesting that he had listened to this and that he was incorporating it himself. And then some of the other examples of the benefits, reducing women's drudgery. Often women have to, like girls, carry firewood long distances. These kinds of products improve that situation. And of course, the products are cleaner, more efficient, more effective. All of these kinds of benefits that I think many of you are familiar with. I just want to talk very briefly about the CO2 story. So if what you care about is carbon reduction, you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of biogas systems, biomass digesters, improved wood or charcoal cook stoves. Solar ends up producing less, but that doesn't mean it's less important. And I think later in the day we'll hear from a number of companies that have actually been able to generate interesting income on the basis of carbon credits, which is another, to me, that is sort of icing on the cake. If you can actually develop an income stream through this, it becomes quite interesting. Very briefly, energy was never in the Millennium Development Goals explicitly, but as you can see, it fed into almost every single one of the Millennium Development Goals, and there's a whole set of discussions now. I think, Deepal, you're actually going to go into a set of discussions yourself. Maybe you can tell us about that later, about what should be the targets in the future. Sam again found a report from the WHO recently which said that almost 1.2 billion more people will need access to electricity, and 1.9 billion more people will need access to modern fuels by 2015 to meet the goal of halving the proportion of people living in poverty. And that is really difficult. 2015 is just 2 years away. So all of us would have to work incredibly hard in order to move that forward. I wanted to also talk a little bit about the kinds of clients that are going to be part of this discussion as we move forward today. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. There are the end users, the clients of many of your organizations need this finance to purchase a range of energy solutions to meet business and household needs. There are also distributors and suppliers. So a number of microfinance organizations, and we'll hear from NWTF later on today from the Philippines, that actually works with entrepreneurs who are clients and also partner agents to end up moving this forward, who end up selling energy products to end users and need credit for that. Energy enterprises need credit, and of course, retail microfinance organizations need credit. Banks and MFIs, they need finance to grow and develop the energy portfolio. We're going to hear from IDCO, which is a apex organization that arguably helped to spur and catalyze the microfinance and energy sector, the clean energy sector in Bangladesh because of the kind of financing that it offered. So I think you'll find that interesting later on today. One of the things that we think is very important is really this idea of the clients at the center. So really thinking about what the clients need and how the microfinance institution or the energy enterprise ends up benefiting as a result of putting the client at the center and what the client wants right in the center of the calculations that it makes. And we'll come back to this in a little while, but what's very important is this idea of market research, really understanding what clients want, understanding what clients need, and understanding how to develop a set of products that meet that demand. We have identified a range of different business models that we think are potentially effective. And some of these we will talk about today. We'll talk about microfinance today. We have some micro-leasing models, payment systems, which are pay-as-you-go systems. They're metering systems that allow people to pay in small amounts. We'll discuss some of those later on today. We will also talk about mobile money a little bit. We'll talk about remittances, which are cross-border money transactions. I'll actually talk a little bit about our project in Haiti at the end of today. And also talk about traditional community finance. I think maybe that will come up a little bit in the discussions with Mahir when he talks about microgrids and how you end up developing financing schemes in a microgrid context. So there are a range of different mechanisms and business models that we think are potentially viable. And there are a range of different kinds of products, financial products, that can work. Mostly what we'll talk about are loans, either for income generation or to improve household quality of life. But there can also be loans to improve energy efficiency, usually tied to housing improvement loans. There can be targeted savings products. Saiful from our team is an expert in savings products and has written some leading publications relating to that. We think that's a very interesting angle. Also remittance products and micro-leasing products. I wanted to show you this slide because microfinance organizations traditionally talk about productive uses. You know, we want to provide loans for productive uses. We don't want to provide loans for consumption. And so the importance of this slide is to be able to show that there's a space which kind of overlaps productive and consumptive uses which are what we call livelihood-related uses. And some of you, I think, have missions that are explicitly devoted to promoting livelihoods. Certainly basics, that's part of your philosophy, and I think others of you also have that view. And so just in terms of energy, if you think about direct business uses, we mentioned some of this earlier, more light at night to work, power to run machines which you need for your businesses, using less fuel if you're a food vendor, which obviously reduces your costs, power for cell phones which you might use for business purposes. Those are all very clearly, directly business purposes. Something which is clearly and purely a consumer purpose is if you needed energy to run a TV. Unless you were renting that TV to your neighbors as a kind of micro movie theater, probably that's a consumption-related purpose. But in between, there are what we call livelihood-related uses, where as a result of that product, people are living healthier lives, they're more likely to be more effective employees, schoolwork, lights for schoolwork, which improves the whole situation in the family, makes people happier, healthier, clean air, clean drinking water, all of those kinds of impacts are very important for people. And often clients will say, when a company starts to provide those kinds of loans, my microfinance organization cares about me because it cares about how I live and it cares about how my family lives. And so we just want you to have in your minds that it's not black or white, it's not productive and consumption related. There is this space in between which is livelihood related, which we think is a very important place for microfinance organizations to grasp and to think about in terms of why they're getting involved in this area. So here are some of the uses. I think we talked about some of these before, and you can see these relate to retail loans for poor individuals and farmers. There are small SME type loans for energy related businesses. We talked about this a little bit before, for stockists, for people producing local biogas digesters or improved stoves. So some of these are some of the uses that you might think about. And we talked earlier about SME type loans for communities, usually for microgrids. When it comes specifically to microfinance, so I think I showed you a slide earlier that looks a little bit like this, where the first blue box was microfinance. Here what we're doing is we're drilling down on that slide. So within the microfinance model, we think that there are a range of sort of sub-models. The one-stop shop model was made famous by Grameen Bank, by Grameen Shakti, which Deepal founded and managed. And the idea there is that you have an institution that provides both the financing and the clean energy. Willem from Solar Now is another example from Uganda of an organization that has taken that philosophy. So the idea that you have two very important sides, you have the technical side, you have the product side, but you're also tying it to the financing side in the same organization. Another model, which a number of you have been involved in, NWFT is an example of this, is the partnership model, where you have one entity that's providing the finance and you have another entity that's providing the energy. So we have Greenlight Planet here that has partnered with a number of different microfinance organizations. I think you'll probably end up talking about Fullerton, but you've also partnered with DCBS and a number of different organizations in India. And hopefully during your presentation you'll talk about what works, what makes a strong partnership, and some of the challenges to moving that partnership model forward. We'll also end up, I'll show a slide very briefly on what we call the umbrella model, where there's really a network of financial institutions. This is not so common, but there are some examples where there are cooperatives or credit unions where a collective of finance organization partners with one energy company. There is another model, which is what we call the brokering model, where there's an entity that sets itself up as a kind of a distributor, where it links the end customer to the microfinance organization. All the microfinance organization does is provide the finance, and this other company ends up providing all of the both sales as well as after-sale service to the customer. And then we'll also very briefly show you an example of what we call the franchise or dealership model, where the energy enterprise provides some credit to dealers and or franchises, and Greenlight Planet does that through its village satis. So I'm going to very quickly skip through these slides so that you can see the models. So this is the one-stop shop model. These statistics are probably out of date now with Grameen Shakti, but Grameen Shakti was able to really grow from using, it ended up using, kind of leveraging the Grameen microfinance network, but it operates independently. It ended up receiving low-cost finance from ITCOL, and what it has, which I think is very special, and which is something that Willem ended up picking up in Solar Now, is this idea of really very high-quality product and very high-quality after-sale service, and highly trained technicians. And Deepal ended up, I think, training half of the women in Bangladesh to be technicians in that context. And it benefited definitely from high population density, which enabled economies of scale. Here is an example of the partnership model, KWFT Microfinance, which is an organization that Art Finance helped to get involved in this sector. So what they ended up doing was really promoting this idea of supplier credit. They ended up working through a whole bunch of village kiosks to end up to sell clean energy. They had a very interesting experience, which is they knew that there was very high demand in Kenya, but they ended up having very bad experiences with products. They had quite bad experience with market spoilage because of product malfunction issues. And so they know the importance of that, so that idea of technology risk is something that they spent a lot of time on, and when they relaunched the project, that was something that they had actually worked quite hard to manage, as it was a significant risk for them. And they ended up developing very close relationships and developing a specific set of partnership criteria with their energy suppliers in order to solve that problem. Here is an example of the umbrella model, Cusco, which is a union of savings and credit cooperatives in Kenya. Because it's an umbrella organization, it was able to reach a large number of SACCOs, which themselves lent to poor people, and they ended up doing a lot of market research to work out where the best target market was in each of those situations. Here's an example of the brokering model, which is a company called Frontier Markets, which is actually a very small company in India, but which has decided that its value proposition is to really be the distributor. It ended up realizing that microfinance organizations in some situations don't want to have their loan officers actually selling product. They just want to do the finance. And so what it is doing is offering that service and the knowledge that it gains of the customer base to microfinance in exchange. We'll end up seeing whether some of these business models emerge. You know, in 5 to 10 years when we all get together, we'll see which of these companies have been successful and which ones have been less successful at the end of the day. And then the franchising model, We will hear from Aravind later about the Green Light Planet model, where they have maintained, they've actually developed and maintained a network of solar satis to reach end clients. And they also partner with microfinance organizations, so they're using two different models simultaneously. There's also an interesting example, which is M-Kopa, which I think many of you have heard of, which is a mobile money company in Kenya that is using mobile money as a way to pay for energy products and also serve as a bill payment mechanism for Kenya Power as well, so that people can actually pay their energy bills using their mobile phones. And particularly in Kenya, this is successful. The Philippines actually might be an interesting market for this. Some of the other markets, in Afghanistan, there was a lot of anticipation that this would be very exciting, and it turned out to be very complicated. So mobile money is not necessarily the way to go in certain markets. And I think some other people, Willem, maybe you can also explain a little bit of your experience later on when you talk in relation to this. There are a number of different innovations that we think are going to be important in this next sector. Cutting costs to clients and the institutions in terms of energy, building new distribution channels for scale, developing pro-core technology. There have been lots of innovations lately over the last few years. Even from 2008, when we started ARC, to now, the products have become much more sophisticated, much more durable, and there's also some interesting movement in terms of carbon tracking that we're noticing. And we're also seeing some interesting innovations in terms of mobilizing capital for energy lending. So, for example, IDCOL has been very successful in Bangladesh. What are the conditions that would allow an IDCOL to operate in Uganda, say, or in India? And what role would that play in terms of catalyzing the market? Would access to that kind of funding really make a difference? So some of the financing opportunities, which we will talk about later today, grants and soft loans are obviously important. We'll hear the IDCOL experience on that. Commercial debt and equity, particularly to finance the growth of an energy lending portfolio. The financing of innovations on the pro-core energy technology side, carbon financing mechanisms, will also be important. And then in terms of portfolio financing, MFIs really need access to the right kind of capital in order to be able to experiment in this area. Microfinance organizations don't want to use their most expensive capital to do something which is a little bit of an experiment. And so, we need to have mechanisms out there to be able to help microfinance organizations mitigate their risks. Guarantee funds. USAID provides what's considered to be quite an interesting guarantee, and maybe Willem, again, you'll speak to us about the USAID DCA later on, that actually makes this less risky in some situations. And there are other donors, multilaterals and bilaterals, that provide these kinds of guarantees and provide the kind of funding that makes this possible. So now on this slide, I'm going to stop for a minute because I've talked a lot. One of the things that we think is very important is to really think through some of the challenges and solutions that microfinance organizations and energy companies actually have faced as they think about developing clean energy portfolios, clean energy businesses. And what we put up on this slide are some of the typical challenges that we hear about. And what we'd like to do is brainstorm with all of you about some of these these challenges and these solutions, hear some stories from you on whether any of these resonate with you, and also to hear solutions that any of you have developed to deal with these kinds of issues. Mr. Ghosh from Bandan will be joining us later on today, and he is in the process with his top management team of beginning to think about entering the energy space. And Saiful actually will talk a little bit about how he ended up coming to that conclusion. But one of the things that we said to him in our discussions with him were, what do you think the biggest risks are? And not just what do you think, you're the visionary, you're the one who wants to move this forward. What does your most conservative person in your organization think are the biggest risks? And normally that's the chief risk officer, What does he say? Does he think you're out of your mind to do this? What does he think are the most tricky things that you're going to have to deal with in order to move this forward?